Well, I don't think you can ever afford to be outworked. I think if you put the effort in and are dedicated to your task and disciplined about how you go about it, I think you're going to win.
Welcome to the Power of Respect podcast with Charlie Leichtweis, author of the book, The Power of Respect in Business. Charlie is one of America's foremost authorities on respect and leadership development. And now, here's Charlie.
Hello, my name is Charlie Leichtweis. Today we are talking about maintaining respect in the broadcast industry. With breakneck schedules, constant changes, and significant competition, it's an extremely stressful work environment. My guest today is Rick Keilty. Rick has spent 8 years as Executive VP with Velo Broadcasting and oversaw the management of several big city newsrooms. He has a lot of insight about working in these high stressful organizations to share with us today. So let's begin. So Rick, welcome and tell me, how did you get started in your career?
Well, that's an interesting question. Actually, I'll take a little path there. At a school, I actually went to work for Emory Air Freight in New York at JFK Airport. Obviously, that was the air freight business. And I worked there for about 3 years and then ended up as a territory manager. And one of the clients for whom we did work for, as in shipping, happened to be a television station, a new one to boot, that was about to sign on. So we were responsible for shipping their first day's broadcast tapes, which we conveniently lost.
Oh, no.
So I was charged with going out to speak with the company to kind of appease their anger and see if we could retain them as a client, which I did, and made a presentation. And as I was leaving the building, the general manager stopped me and said he appreciated the presentation and the hands-on approach, and then offered me a job, which
Wow.
I was quite surprised to hear, which I turned down at the moment and thanked him for that. But then persistently he was over the next few weeks. And then about a month later, I was bitten by the bug and accepted his offer to go to work in the broadcasting business.
That's quite a story. What strikes me is that it sounds like you were able to mitigate their anger with the respect you showed them on your presentation.
Well, that's an interesting point. Emory was really the Cadillac of the air freight business back in those days, and they were known for their training. And obviously a heavy focus on customer service, and their catchphrase was, "We really don't have anything else to sell other than service." And so that stuck, and I carried that with me, and still to this day, that, you know, the customer is really where it's all about. And so it was a fairly natural environment because we did it wasn't the first time we lost a piece of freight. So I had given that presentation before. And so in any event, I did. And obviously he respected what I had to say and continued to have trust in us and went on to continue using us. And I also never imagined that one meeting would result in a 30-year career in broadcasting, but so it did.
I think that's a great point for our audience, that you never know what may come of the relationships you build or have with people you come in contact with in these situations, including very stressful ones like the one you described.
Yeah, it was not a happy room when I walked in there, that's for sure.
I'll bet. So
Yeah.
You have significant leadership experience across organizations and numerous business functions. What would you say are some of your biggest challenges you face as a leader, and how did you tackle them? You know, make examples of maybe success and or failure,
Sure.
to give the audience a feel.
Sure. Well, the broadcast industry is really all about people, both the employees who work in the company and then the customers who we serve. And so developing an understanding and respect for both of those disciplines is critical. I'll deal with the employee first. I kind of think of a television station as somewhat of a creative colony. So in essence, you have a small band of folks that are in the same building that are very talented, under a great deal of stress because the industry is laced with urgency. Either a news story or, for that matter, a commercial position that goes unsold is unsold forever. And so that's the urgency that I speak about. And they're also wound pretty tight. So consequently, you have a bunch of creative people under a tremendous stressful situation that, takes on its own life. And so the key there to me is really understanding what they're all about and trying to give them enough space in which they can do their best work. And I think that's the key on the employee side. Much the same as that on the viewer side. You spend a lot of time in the community talking with viewers, and they have a tendency to call you up and tell you what's on their mind. And listening is a key element in that piece of the equation as well, because you certainly want to listen to get a full grasp of their passion for why they're calling, and then see if you can develop an understanding for their position and also your position as to why you did or did not, let's say, cover the story as they would have liked, and explain that in terms where they come away with at least understanding where you were coming from. So to me, those were the two biggest challenges. You have to get both of those right, because obviously that's your business. And if you lose either one, you're not in particularly good shape.
Certainly. So when I listen to that story and I think about the pressure to get the scoop or get the next thing on air as quickly as possible, and the competition you have to do that with or against, how did you manage to be able to work with the creative culture you just described to be able to make sure you listened enough to what they're saying to be able to let them understand that the results of it will be important with their contribution?
Great question. And really where a good deal of the management skills in the building come into play. Obviously, the hands-on deck group of the reporters, photographers, if you will, that are really engaging all the time with the public. And then, of course, you have news management and the understanding of which I speak. If that idea was communicated to me, it's my responsibility to make sure that I communicate it to the other managers in the building so that they come away with the understanding I have. And then, frankly, their experience in journalism is going to take root, and they're going to go about covering the story in the manner in which it should. I was fortunate to have spent 30 years with a company that truly respected the principles of journalism. And so regardless of how the situation turned out, you always just follow the truth, and it gets you to where you need to be. And that sometimes is not going to make everybody happy.
No, that's so true. You mentioned a couple times listening, and to me, that's an extremely important element of leadership, the ability to listen. And even if leadership is in a position where they think they know the answer, I have found that if you listen longer, you sometimes find out that what the person is trying to tell you about the issues is different than you assumed. And therefore you can engage that person more directly. They believe you're listening to them, which is important. You are listening to them. And the third thing is that you finally get exactly what they're talking about. And if you were right at the beginning in your assumption, you'll be right later. So waiting to listen and listening longer are skills that are extremely important. Sounds like you found that to be the case in your roles.
True. I think, it's just human nature to form an opinion very quickly once you've been given some information or picked up information on your own. And that sometimes can get you into trouble. And so to your point, you need to make sure that you spend the time to listen in depth to what either your employees or, for that matter, the viewers in our case, were saying to you, because the more they're talking and you're listening, the better the outcome, in my opinion, always ends up being.
That's great insight, very much so. So when you think about your experience, are there some examples, and maybe this is harder to talk about, are there some examples where the situation of respect, either on your part towards others or others towards you, wasn't as good as it could be, and therefore, you learned sort of maybe what not to do in those situations?
Yeah, we sure all have those. I guess I'll use the example. I was involved in a number of turnaround situations where the television station was not performing very well. And so my responsibility as general manager was to turn that around. And in that process, you always experience turnover. And obviously a good bit of that is forced turnover. And so consequently, in that environment, things are of a particularly sensitive nature. And so you really do need to spend time, because you're going to change people's lives, obviously, by, for lack of, adequate performance, they're going to need to move on. And how you deal with that situation says a lot about, one, your company, and two, what it would be like to work there, because you're obviously going to have other people coming in the door. And that news travels fast, as you know. Mm-hmm. So consequently, if you don't handle that well, and not every situation was handled as well as it could be, to your point, people are going to walk away with the wrong attitude. Obviously, they're not going to be happy, but as long as you can achieve some level of understanding as to why the circumstances required this change to be made, the likelihood that they'll go on and be successful somewhere else, and they won't harbor any malcontent for the company that they're leaving. So I think some of those situations, I look back and I probably could have listened longer. I probably could have said some things differently, but it's such a highly charged environment that it's difficult sometimes to keep yourself within the right lane, so to speak.
Right. I find that it's always the most difficult thing in business is to let somebody go. And if it's based on performance, I find a lot of times that people have not been informed of their performance as they go. And when I talk about informed, it's not just a matter of criticism. It's a matter of helping them understand how they can improve and how you might be able to help them. Do you have any examples of that, perhaps, in those experiences of changing the structure of the organizations you described?
Yeah, I do, and it's a great point. It always seemed to me that, while you have systems set up for performance evaluation and review, probably the least productive time to be doing that is on what is, sometimes the annual increase.
Right.
I think those things need to be separated. And as opposed to a formal review process, it seems to me that the more conversations you're having throughout the whole time with an employee, where you're spending time with them, getting to know them getting to know you, creates the right environment for those conversations to take place. Constructive criticism can work well in those situations if you have a rapport with an employee,
right,
and just the opposite if you do not. Despite your best efforts, they're probably not going to understand. So to me, it's continually reaching out and communicating with employees on a variety of levels. And as I said, trying to get to understand them a little better serves you well in that regard.
Right. So in addition to listening and maybe some of the communication strategies you just mentioned, what are some of the other things you did to develop a relationship with the people you worked with and or for?
Well, let's see, I'll use an example. We had a female anchor who was very well established in the market, and we were making a significant change on a newscast. And so I had to sit down. I had made the decision that it was important for her to leave the position that she was in and take on the position in the other newscast. Well, obviously that was unsettling for her. Mm-hmm. And as a result, she became very unhappy and decided that she was going to leave, which was unfortunate for us. I felt that the opportunity that we were creating for her would eventually lead to a success for her since we were starting a brand new newscast. And for her to be as talented and as experienced as she is, this really gives her an opportunity to show her talent and be part of the creation, so to speak. Well, she didn't see it that way. And unfortunately, I probably could have done some things a little differently, thinking back. But she left, and we were not better off as a result of that. So, lesson.
I'm sure we've all had situations where we thought we could do something better or a little differently. And that's the whole point of learning, which we shouldn't be afraid of or bothered by. That's just being human. What would have been, in that case, if you can think of maybe something specific you might have done differently in that case? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I just, if
no, it's a good question. I guess thinking back, I probably could have offered her some other opportunities inside the newsroom where she may be able to have covered some special features, or maybe gone on assignment somewhere that would raise her profile to kind of round out the move to the new show, so to speak. I think thinking back, that may have appeased her concern that it was a demotion, which is the way she saw it. And if I could have done some things to fill out the dance card and make her feel a little bit more part of the equation, so to speak, perhaps that would have worked.
That's a great lesson. I think that applies to a lot of people, hopefully, that are listening, to see how they can think differently about their situation. So what are you most proud of as a leader?
Okay, well, I think I'll go back to those turnaround situations, because in the two instances where there was extreme need, both of those stations turned around and became extremely successful. That was really as a result of the work of an awful lot of people. But as I mentioned earlier, when you have turnover, you need to replace resources. And so I think our reputation as a company and how we handled the situation created an ability for us to recruit. So it was a place where you wanted to go to work. And so we were able to raise the level of talent in both of those situations, which resulted in increased performance, and, became a recognized, both television stations became recognized for their news excellence through awards from the industry. Again, my role was a small part of that, but really the people that came in did a terrific job in managing success and took that station to a new level in both cases.
I think you make, Rick, an extremely important point here. It's not just about the handling of the change that occurs and how you've led up to that. It's about the effect of that change on the future as well, on the organization and the people who remain. And the idea that people looking from the outside want to understand, how does this organization treat their people? And even though change has happened and change is hard, I understand that. If people see that that's done in largely a fairly fair fashion, and certainly respectful of all people involved to the extent that you can, that bodes well for the future change of that organization that you just described.
Well, I couldn't agree more. It was an extremely rewarding career, and nothing gives you, at least me, more satisfaction than seeing success, of course, which we all want. But
Right.
when you can achieve that success through people which you had a responsibility or role and bring you on board, and then as they grow in their career, go on to do bigger and better things, that's tremendous satisfaction for me, and really where I enjoyed the most my experience in years in broadcasting, because that's a regular occurrence, because you don't spend a lot of time at each television station. You kind of move around as if you're in the Army, so to speak.
All right.
So as you see people, move through your particular situation, and then, as I said, go on to bigger and better things, that's tremendously rewarding to me, and was.
Yeah, I think that's the fact these days, or the truth of any career. People just don't spend 30, 40, 50 years in one enterprise anymore in their careers.
Yeah.
Every change is everywhere, and it's constant. So tell me about a leader who most influenced you.
I worked for a executive VP when I moved to the C-suite in Dallas, and Jack was a tremendous force in the industry, highly respected, without question. But to me, his ability to manage people and manage them with a high level of respect brought trust into the equation. So when he was on the case, or making decisions, you trusted that they were going to be in the best interest of the company and the right decision. It always struck me that all the time I spent working for him, which was about 8 years, he seemed to always have the preemptive question that I didn't think of. And as much preparation as you wanted to make to get ready for a meeting with him, which is what you would have needed to do, regardless, he always found that one question that I hadn't thought of, and that to me was so unique.
Yep.
And made you a better person because you had one to be prepared, right? And then you left a meeting thinking that, well, that's not going to happen again. The next time I'm going to make sure that, and then of course the drill repeats itself.
Right.
He was a tremendous leader and highly responsible for a lot of the success that company had. And the fact that we were able to spend those 8 years together working really side by side was a tremendously rewarding experience for me. And I have a high level of respect for his ability and talents.
What perhaps are some of the specific things that he might have done that endeared you to them? Obviously, you had respect for him and his ability and his career situations. But in terms of how he actually garnered respect from the people, how did he treat people? In a few words, or some examples of how he treated people that really stood out to you.
Well, it was his manner of communication. You never got the feeling that you were with somebody who felt that they were in a superior position than you. He always was very endearing, very engaging, very straightforward, which, again, as I mentioned earlier, brought about the trust that whatever was going to be decided was going to be done with a high level of transparency and, frankly, candor. And so you develop that trust for his ability to lead. He also, I think, was able to see things or talent in people that might not be obvious to others, because he ended up placing people in positions which to others initially seemed like it was not a good fit, but it seemed like most every time it worked out. And after a couple of months, it became obvious that was the right decision for that person. That insight, to be able to see that when it wasn't obvious, at least to a lot of other people, I thought was a keen talent that, in my experience, not a lot of people have. And again, why it was so rewarding to spend as much time as I got to spend with him.
What are some of the things that you look for if you were to hire somebody or work with somebody in terms of their personality or their fit, if you will, the kinds of things that not just the technical skills, but the fit side of, so to speak, that you look for as a leader in others?
Well, I think you need to be a communicator. You need to have the ability to put people at ease with who you are and make them feel comfortable with your presence, regardless of which level you're at. And I think coming in the door, you'd like to see that in people, that, let's face it, regardless of your individual discipline, you all have to work together if you're going to achieve success. And some people in a technical aspect may be good at what they do, but if you can't communicate and embrace and engage with other individuals within the workplace, I think you fall short of your goal. So I look for examples in somebody's experience where they can demonstrate to me that they have that ability. And so I'll ask for examples of that very thing, just as you asked me. I'll ask them and go back through their career and show me an example where you demonstrated that you were an affiliator and that you were able to work with people, and that maybe even that you were responsible for making change happen because of those abilities. I mean, I think those are rare qualities in the workforce. And if you can find those people or with that skill, I think you're much better off.
No, I think that's great. And so if you're speaking to an upcoming leader, it sounds like that you already gave us some of the advice you'd give them. What other advice would you give an upcoming leader that you were coaching somebody on? Let's say you're coaching somebody on some designated frustrations they have about their career and or options they're trying to consider. And I know it's sort of a hypothetical question, but just if you could characterize that.
Well, I don't think you can ever afford to be outworked. I think if you put the effort in and are dedicated to your task and disciplined about how you go about it, I think you're going to win. And I think that's a great, I think that overcomes perhaps some other shortcomings, if you will. Not everybody has as much talent as some other people, but boy, you can just see when they work hard and put the time in, and as I said, are dedicated to task, results happen. And let's face it, it's about results-oriented people in the workforce. And again, if you can create a teamwork environment where it's a solid and good place to work and people fit into that environment, you're looking for people who will be a fit. And so I would make sure to tell somebody that, look, here's the things you need to concentrate on, and make sure that you're making your expectations abundantly clear. I think sometimes there's a lot of ambiguity in the workplace, and that tends to get people thinking about the wrong things. And it's hard to kind of stay on point when you're worrying about this, that, or the other thing because of that ambiguity.
Right.
If you're straightforward with people, I think they may not always like what you have to say, but at least they understand who you are and where you're coming from.
And I think that's also an excellent point. People want to know why and how what they do matters.
Yeah.
They want to know whether they're doing it the right way and whether or not someone with more experience can help them be better at what they're doing. You mentioned results here. We've been talking about relationships a lot, which is a key. To me, leadership is an equal emphasis on results and relationships. So I think your point on results being the pressure point is very important, and your points on relationships helping facilitate that, to optimize that, is extremely important as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you can achieve both of those. And I think the executive, let's say, that can strike that balance within the workforce, I think is going to move the needle faster than somebody who doesn't. And you probably, in your role, have seen countless examples of where that is and is not the case. And I mean, that's where it really comes into play, making things happen.
No, absolutely. Well, Rick, I want to thank you very much for being with us today. And I want to especially thank you, the audience, listening in on this episode of The Power of Respect. If you like what you heard today, please consider sharing the podcast and visit our website, expertsinhow.com. A quick reminder, if you'd like to read my book, The Power of Respect in Business, it's available on Amazon. Thanks again for listening. And remember, respect builds trust, trust builds relationships, and relationships is the key to leadership.
This has been the Power of Respect podcast with Charlie Leichtweis, author of the book, The Power of Respect in Business. To listen to more episodes and to learn about Charlie's leadership development programs, visit his website, expertsinhow.com.